and gentlemen, discúlpeme, mi español está bastante bien, voy a hablar en inglés. So I'm going to speak about innovation and employment and some of the results of the study that have been done in a project financed by the European Union, comparing innovation and employment in Europe and China. Governments have, as one of the goals of government, and it has been said very clearly yesterday by your Minister of Finance, is the promotion of innovation. And innovation is seen as one of the drivers of economic growth. And many theories now in endogenous growth put a lot of emphasis on innovation. And without innovation, countries are not considered to be able to compete on the international stage. So, for instance, in Europe, there was this Lisbon strategy that was designed to make Europe the leader of the world in science and technology by the year 2010. Well, it hasn't quite succeeded, but this was the goal put by the European Commission. And similar goals are also pursued by other governments. But on the other hand, there is also the goal of creating employment or preserving employment. And the question is whether these two goals are not incompatible with each other. In other words, does innovation really raise employment, or is innovation also maybe sometimes destroying jobs? You can think of two types of innovations. One is process innovation, and the other one is product innovation. Process innovation has as the goal to decrease the cost of production, the average cost of production. Especially in countries where wages are very high, it means generally cutting employment. So this is what's called the displacement effect, and this will have a negative effect on employment. But you could also think that as the average cost decreases, firms will also decrease their price, of course, depending on the price-cost margin. And as the price decreases, demand will increase. And hence, indirectly, you could conceive that after some time, process innovation could have a positive effect. Hence, the net effect of process innovation is unclear and has to be decided on the basis of econometric investigations. The other type of innovation is product innovation, coming up with a new product. It could be a product new to the firm that the firm has never put on the market before. And when I say product, it could also be service. But it could also be a more radical type of innovation when the firm comes up with a new product or a new service that did not exist on the market before. Okay? And when you have new products, of course, there is a demand for this new product. Everybody wants to buy, say, an iPhone, and that will increase the production of iPhones and hence also increase the employment. But you could also think that some of the products could be complementary to existing products. So if you come up with a new software, you also need maybe new computers that can handle this software better than old computers. So that will again push up the demand for computers and hence raise employment. But some products may also just substitute old products. Okay, some new types of smartphones replace old type of smartphones. And then you have a cannibalization effect. And that will have a negative effect on employment. And finally, you have productivity differences, so different technologies in producing the old goods and the new goods. So again, the net effect is unclear. It could be positive, it could be negative. So that was the intention of this study, and similar studies will be presented afterwards by Ezequiel Taxier and Gustavo Crespi. Similar studies have been done in Latin America. Let me quickly give you the model, and I've really simplified it. There will be only one equation. We consider that there are two periods, period 1 and period 2. And there are two goods, the old goods and the new goods. So in period 1, you only observe the old goods, and that is what we denote by Y11. So Y, the output of the old good in period 1. In period 2, you observe the old goods that are still being produced, maybe with a different, probably with the same technology, but then you also have the new goods. So you observe Y12, that's the production of the old goods in period 2, and Y22 is the production of the new goods that did not exist in period 1. Now the model is a bit complicated than that, but we just simplify it and say actually all that is driving this model is that there is a productivity in the production of each of the two goods, and that is denoted by theta IT, which is the efficiency in producing good I in period T, which is nothing but the labor productivity in producing that good. So it's the output of good I in period T divided by the employment for good I in period T. Then you can revert this equation and write it in terms of labor demand. LIT would be YIT divided by theta IT. So this theoretical model is a model, the Harrison, Jean-Mandrieu, Mérès-Peters model, and we generally call it Jordi model. Jordi Jean-Mandrieu is the one who actually devised this model. I'll give you the reference a bit later. So all it does basically is to decompose the growth of employment. Right? In the numerator, you have the employment in the second period, which is the employment to produce the old good, L12, plus the employment to produce the new good, L22, minus the employment in the first period, which is L11, divided by the employment in the first period. That's the growth rate of employment. And hence you can decompose this into the log of L12 over L11 plus L22 over L11. So in a way, it's the growth due to the old good and in the production of the old good, and the growth in demand for labor due to the production of the new good. And hence, when you decompose this, little l is simply the same as delta L over L. It's the growth rate of employment, can then be decomposed into three categories. The first term there is the change in the efficiency in producing old products. So it's technological change. You can produce the old product probably better in the second period than you could do it in the first period. Then there is simply the growth in demand due to the growth in the production of the old good, which is the second term in this decomposition. And then the third term, that's the most interesting term, is the growth in employment, or the decrease in employment, due to the appearance of new products, given that there is a difference in efficiency in producing the old product and the new product, which is given by theta 11 over theta 22. So the goal of this study is to confront this model with data, with microdata, and to be able to decompose the growth in employment, and in particular what is due to new products. New products really create employment or destroy employment. The data we use for this study are firm data, microdata. So data from so-called innovation surveys, which in Europe is called CIS, Community Innovation Surveys, and you have similar surveys in Latin America. And in these surveys, which are based on the Oslo or the Bogota manual, you have actually four types of innovation. You have product innovation, as I explained before, is new products, could be new to the firm, new to the market. You have process innovation, a new way of producing given goods. Could also have organizational innovation, so changing the way you organize the production activities, or marketing innovation, a new way of putting the product on the market. So those are yes-no questions, so-called binary data. Then there is a second interesting type of data in these innovation surveys, which is the share of total sales due to new products. For instance, if it was 30%, it would mean that out of your total turnover in a particular year, 30% of it is production of goods which did not exist the year before, or generally it's over a period of 3 years, so did not exist 2 years before. And that actually is the key variable that allows us to decompose and to identify the effect of product innovation on employment in a given firm. So these are the references. So as I said, this Harrison, Jean-Mandrio, Merez, Peters model is the one that we are going to use, and it's also going to be used in the Latin American context. Then that's in the same second reference is an application of this model to Italian data. The third is an application to Chinese data, and the fourth is an application to European data. Let me first give you the results of, in the case of Germany. Germany is actually a country where innovation surveys have been done annually, as opposed to every 4 years or every 2 years in most of the other European countries and also Latin American countries, with maybe the exception of Chile. In Germany, it has been annual since about 1990. So there is a large panel data of firms, which is quite interesting. And hence, for the case of Germany, we have been able to identify 5 periods, 98, 2000, 2000, 2002, and so on. So it's called the Mannheim Innovation Panel, and the analysis has been done on firms in the manufacturing sector and some firms in the core service sectors. And this is just the end result, so I'm not presenting to you all the problems, econometric problems in estimating this model. This is just the end result, which in a sense summarizes what we have found. So the employment growth in manufacturing, and that is over the whole period, so from 1998 to 2008, there was a growth in employment of, on average, of 5.3%. There was a decrease in employment due to technological change, increases in productivity. You know, if you increase productivity, you need less labor to produce the same thing. And that decreased employment over that period by 5.9%. That's the second rectangle you have there. The third rectangle is the effect of process innovation. In a sense, if you want process innovation, and remember, in these innovation surveys there was this question, did you introduce a new process? So by introducing this variable, we can see by how much the increase or the decrease in employment was due to the introduction of new process. And you see that this is a very small component, minus 0.3%. And then comes the increase in employment due to the increase in the production of old goods, so the goods that existed in the 2 periods. And that explains an increase in employment of 4.1% in that period. And finally, you have the interesting thing that we are really interested in, is the effect of new products. And you see that new products increase employment by 7.4%. So if you add this minus 5.9, minus 0.3, plus 4.1, and plus 7.4, you get to this net effect of 5.3% increase in employment. And here you have it decomposed into the 5 sub-periods, and you see every time more or less the same pattern. You have a net positive increase, and that's really driven by product innovations. And the big negative effect is productivity growth, which in terms of labor is a bad thing, but in terms of society and well-being is a good thing. You see there are some differences over these periods that have to do with business cycles and so on. And here you have it for services. So for services in Germany, you have even a slightly bigger increase in employment. And again, it's the same kind of pattern. You have a bit less of a technological change in services than you had in manufacturing. But again, you have this drive of new product innovation that is giving you a net positive result. Now let's see this case of China. China is a very interesting case. You will see that China is a bit different from Europe. We had the chance to work with Chinese partners, and in China you also have microdata. It's not exactly an innovation survey, although China has now also conducted a first innovation survey. But in the Chinese data, in the annual census of manufacturing, if you want, they already had some questions relating to product innovations. So we had data from 1999 to 2006, annual data. And we have decomposed, in presenting the results, we have decomposed it into 5 regions. The Bohai Rim region is basically Beijing region, the Yangtze, which is basically Shanghai, the Pearl River Delta region, which is Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Middle China, and West China, so what is it, Hunan and the western provinces. We have also decomposed it into industries, high-tech, medium-high, medium-low, and low-tech, and into 3 types of ownership: state-owned firms, private, and foreign firms. There are still a number of state-owned firms in China, so it's interesting to see how different is the relationship in state-owned firms. And finally, we've decomposed it into size: more than 2,000 employees, between 3 and 2,000, 300 and 2,000, and less than 300. Now, in China, the data are a little bit different because those are annual data. The question is not how much have you introduced a new product in the last 3 years, which is the typical question in the innovation surveys, but here it's have you introduced a new product in the last year? Okay, and what was the share of total sales due to the products that were introduced in the last year? Well, it's interesting that we have this difference because it allows us to do a little bit of a dynamic analysis, very simple dynamic analysis. Like here we have looked at the growth between 2005 and 2006. In the first column, we relate this growth in employment to the new product growth in year T. Right? It's just the products that were introduced in that last year, 2006. In the second column, we look at all the products that have been introduced in the last 2 years, and in the third column, that those have been introduced in the last 3 years. So that gives a little bit more time, if you want, for that new product effect, positive effect, which we hope to be positive, to work out. And what we see is that in the first column, we get 1.3. Remember, 1.3 is the efficiency in the production of the old products divided by the efficiency in the production of the new product. So that means in the first year when the good is introduced, the technology is not quite there yet. The efficiency is not so good as it was in the production of the old products. Then after 1 year, it already gets better. Okay? You get a relationship, a ratio of 0.7. So if you want to reverse it, that means that the efficiency in the production of new products is 30% higher than in the production of old products. And after 2 years, it's already 0.4, so double as high. And here we have done it for the period 2004-2006. So we looked at the growth rate over this 3-year period. And again, you see the same phenomenon. If you give more time for firms to adjust, in a sense it's learning by doing, if you want, they get more efficient in producing the new goods. Actually, the last column there is really what would be similar to the analysis we had done on the European data. That's to say you take a growth rate over a 3-year period and you look at the products that have been introduced during that 3-year period. So here we have this decomposition with the various ways of computing the growth rates, but what you see is basically always the same pattern. So maybe let's look at the last row, which is the most comparable to the ones we had in Europe. So you see that you had an employment growth of 4.18% between 2004 and 2006. 15.9% was due to the growth of the production of old products, 7.5% to the production of new products, and there was a big productivity increase of minus 19.2%. So China is really catching up in terms of catching up in the technology of the Western countries. Here it's interesting. Here again you have the same thing, but let's look at the third column, which is the one that we just looked at, and let's compare this now with the results that have been obtained in the original Harrison et al. Paper of 2008, which concerned France, Germany, Spain, and the UK, and in that second study that I referred to by Hall, Lotti, and Meres on Italian data. So you see that for the employment growth was actually, apart from Italy, higher in Europe than in in China. It was 4.2% in China. It was above 4.2% in Europe, except for Italy, where it was only 2.5%. Productivity growth, 19.2% growth, which means a decrease in employment due to the productivity, much higher in China than in Europe, and much higher in China indeed than in the European countries. Old product growth, however, much higher in China than in Europe. So there's much bigger increase in the production of the old products in China than in the European countries. And finally, new product growth is about the same. So in terms of, coming up with new products and the growth that is due to these new products, it's relatively similar in China as it is in Europe on average. It's a bit higher in Germany. It's almost the same in Spain. It's a bit lower in Italy and the UK. And here you have a decomposition in the 5 regions. Then you see that there are some differences between the regions. So some regions are doing much better than other regions, but I mean, that's not that important. So to conclude, you see that there is a much bigger increase in productivity in China. There is also a bigger increase in employment due to the production of old goods. But in terms of the production of new goods, it's about the same in Europe and in China. Now, to finish, I haven't put it on slides. Another thing that we also looked at is the relationship between the survival of firms and whether the firms are innovative or whether they are R&D firms, so doing R&D. For that, we had about 100,000 Chinese firms between 2000 and 2006, and we only took firms that did not exist before 2000. So we really take the same kind of firms, new firms, and we look at whether these new firms, if the firms that did R&D, be it in the first year or be it over all the years in which they exist, whether those firms had a tendency to survive longer than the firms that did no R&D. And we found that indeed firms that did R&D had a tendency to survive longer. The survival rate in China is about 2.9 years for small and medium enterprises and about 7 years for large enterprises. So it's a very dynamic economy. Now you could say, is it really R&D that's important, or is it coming up with new products on the market? So we also looked at firms that were innovative in the sense of coming up with new products and firms that were not innovative. And we find the same result. Firms that are innovative tend to survive longer than non-innovative firms. Then we ask ourselves the question, what is more important? Is it innovation or is it R&D? So we compared firms that innovated without doing R&D and firms that did R&D without innovating in terms of new products. And we find that R&D is more important in terms of predicting the survival of firms than coming up with new products. And finally, we found some kind of non-linear relationship, like a hum-shaped relationship. So that means there is an optimum point of R&D and innovation beyond which there is no longer necessarily an increase in the survival rate. So again, there seems to be a link between innovation and employment. So that is maybe the message that comes out of this analysis. Innovation is not bad for employment. Innovation is actually good for employment. So thank you for your attention.